Attention, everybody. The views and opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and or their affiliate and subordinate ministries and or nonprofits. So, backed by popular demand, it's the man we all know and love, Steve Mickey Mac.
Thank you, and good morning and happy Labor Day. I can't believe it's Labor Day. It's the unofficial end of summer, but today it's going to feel like summer. We're looking at 91 degrees and sunny today, so it's going to be quite warm today. So get out that sunscreen, and this might be your last chance to get out there and get some rays. So I just want to appreciate Matt for being my engineer today, and thanks a lot, Matt. We're going to be...
I do what I can.
You do what you can. And so before I forget, I just want to make sure that I put a plug in for my good friend Randy Barr, whose show Spirit in America is tomorrow at 9 at this time. And he's got a former city, or I guess from Humansville. He got fired for having a Bible on his desk. So that should be a pretty interesting conversation tomorrow. So you want to stay tuned for Spirit in America at 9 a.m. Central, right here on Acts Radio and Acts Television. I thought you were going to say something.
No, that's all right. I'm just getting prepared.
I have a very I call him a very special guest, but he's been a good friend of mine for 15-something years, and 15, 20 years, and he is going to be giving his testimony, but you'll want to tune in for this because those of you who have had problems with addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol, you want to listen very carefully to what John has to say, and so we're going to be talking to him shortly. I told him we would be getting with him shortly. Anyway, Jeff, welcome to the team, by the way. Jeff with a G.
Yeah,
anyway,
the microphone's not on. No, we're not on there.
That's okay.
They can't see us at the moment. Hold on a second. So that's John Boynton?
Yes. And he's... we've had some crazy times together, I'm telling you. Back in I would say the late 80s, probably. Late 80s, early 90s, something like that. Anyway, he's also... works with the hearing aid. I don't know exactly. They call him the hearing aid guy because he actually does a Facebook thing live called the hearing aid guy. So we'll be talking about that as well. Well, I guess we're going to be getting ready to call him in just a minute. And I want to say to you folks that I hope that you guys have a safe and wonderful Labor Day weekend, and I'm serious. Just take it easy out there today because this might be the last day. There's a lot of boating going on out there, I'm sure, today, and picnicking and that. So that's just a safety thing. So go ahead and give them a call because I'm going to run out of things to say before the interview.
He knows you're calling, right?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, John. It's Steve.
What's up?
Hey,
what's up?
I don't know if it's in the background. Did you turn everything down so I can hear you in the background?
Yes, let me go to.
I just want to make sure that because it's going to feedback and it's going to echo and.
Yeah. Okay. I'll hang on for a minute.
All right.
Okay.
We're professionals.
Okay, here I am.
All right. Hey, John. Nice to have you on the phone. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been. Yes.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed your Facebook Lives, especially your good friend, I don't know, remember what his name was. He just recently passed. You went on the paddle boat with him?
Yes, Earl.
Earl. So you guys just met. How did you guys really get to know each other? Did you take care of him, or what was the deal there?
Yeah, I grew up with that family in the church, and they actually knew my parents before I was born. And so we just kept in contact throughout the years. And when I was single, I just wanted to I watched their house during the winter break when they went down to Florida. So that's how I got to know him a lot better, because when they came back, the pandemic hit, and I didn't want to really go back to my boss's house, and because I was used to staying on the lake and all that, and that's when they allowed me to stay there until the 15th of June.
Wow, that was, I mean, just the talks and just you being on the, it was so serene, and I was just curious just to know how you got to know him. But John, we're going to be getting into your story a little bit. It's been, 15 years since I've actually seen you, but we've known each other probably about 15, 20 years, hasn't it?
Right.
You were known as Johnny B at the time. You were, yeah. It was Cindy and Jackson, right?
Yes.
And
Cindy and Larkin Jackson.
Yeah, Larkin Jackson. Yeah. And they started a, I guess I don't want to say dance club, but it was called the Sunlight Club, and we tried. Yeah. I know that you guys tried very hard to keep it going over there in Waterford at the old Billie Jean King Tennis Center in Waterford there.
Right.
But that's how I got to really know you, and then we became friends, and then I didn't see you for a while. Next thing I know, I go over to Shepherd. What was the name of the Kurt Monsinger? He was pastor. Shepherd.
Yeah, Shepherd Fellowship Church.
Yep. And that's when I saw you for the first time in quite a while. And so tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, I already know it, but for the folks out there.
Yes. I grew up in a Christian home. I was so blessed actually to have two great parents, loved the Lord, served in the church. My mom was a soloist. My dad was a school administrator, and he was very involved in the Sunday school programs at church as well as the kids programs. And I trusted Christ as my Savior early on at the age of 5, and definitely grew up knowing that I was serving the Lord because I had a heart for, they called me a man after God's heart like David in the Bible, and paid it forward in the youth group when I graduated from high school and became a youth leader in the kids programs. So.
Wow, so you kept yourself busy. You had a busy household.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, and it's when you're growing up in an environment like that, it's almost like were they really strict? Was your mom and dad really strict, or was it just a normal family thing where you had normal everyday just family things that went on, or was it because they were involved in church, it was a strict home?
Not really strict home. I mean, there were rules, and we respected my parents. I really loved them and respected them as well. My dad wasn't that strict. He did have guidelines and rules and regulations, but I wouldn't say strict as far as, ruled with an iron fist or anything like that.
Yeah, because there are a lot of places, there's a lot of families that are involved in church who, they do rule with an iron fist. Not always, but, I do know of a few.
Right, yep.
And then, when you're growing up, when you're a PK or a preacher's kid or an MK missionary kid, everybody automatically thinks, oh, man, that must be a real strict family. They must do things this way. They're stereotyped. And that wasn't that wasn't the a situation with you.
Not at all. Not at all. I willingly, made my decisions. My parents allowed me to make the decisions. Obviously, they brought us up in the way of the Lord, and it was for us to decide what route to go. and all that. But obviously, being in the church, I definitely had that love for the Lord and wanted to serve the Lord. And I was not a typical teenager like a lot of people say. You know how that is when you're a teenager, and they say, you know what it's like when you're a teenager. You
Yeah.
get into mischief and all kinds of stuff.
All right.
Wasn't like that.
Yeah, because obviously when you're in a Christian environment like that, that's what it is. It's an actual stereotype. People automatically think you're this way and that way, when really you're just in a normal. You should be in a normal family situation. They just stereotype you, and that's not. I don't think that's the right thing, because until. Oh man. Let me put it this way. When you're in a Christian family and you're in a situation where everybody's involved in some sort of Christian ministry, they just they want you to act a certain way, I guess. Certain people want you to act a certain way, like other missionary kids, because they might have one rule. They might be ruling with an iron fist, and then they see you or somebody like yourself that's not being ruled with an iron fist, and like, well, then they get that jealous, I guess. I don't know if that has that ever happened with you?
Not necessarily. I remember growing up, a lot of people referred to my house as the mansion because we lived out in the country. It was a ways away from the church and all that, but they always thought when they came over to my house, boy, you live in a mansion, which is far from a mansion, but it was a nice house.
Yeah, well, anything bigger than the house that you're in probably is considered a mansion, I guess.
Right.
So tell me a little bit more about your addiction that you were telling me about, your drug addiction, and if there was anything like that going on. And I think that's what you and I were talking about the other day or yesterday. And I did hear your testimony, and that was a very moving testimony, but I'm glad that you're back in action and you're doing well. So
yeah.
Can you go on a little bit about that? Or?
Sure. I grew up, like I said, I grew up in a Christian home, and drugs and alcohol, smoking, and all that was definitely something that I stayed away from, didn't entertain or anything. And I grew up, I would say, a sheltered life because we lived in the country and weren't too involved in a lot of sports activities or anything from school or even from the church. That was difficult. But my parents always took us to Christian, events that the church sponsored and had for the kids and all that. But I ended up getting married in 1996 and loved married life for a while. But in 2000, my wife and I decided to start a family, and we had a boy in 2000. We always wanted a millennium baby. So October 26th, we had a boy, and we completed the family in 2003 with a baby girl, and we had the best of both worlds. When we got married, it was always the understanding that she wanted to be a stay-at-home engineer, and I was the provider, got a job. God provided a great job in 2000 to be able to support the whole family. But I kind of felt a little along the ways when my wife had my son, and especially with the daughter, that she kind of put me on the back burner. And that kind of bothered me, obviously, because I wasn't the focus in her life anymore. The kids were, and so that bugged me. But I was involved in the church, always got heavily involved in the church ministry as well as she did down the road. But definitely things were starting to distance in our marriage because of this. But what I didn't realize is I was very independent, still married, and that shouldn't work because when you get married, two become one. But I was, because of independence and selfishness, I still wanted to do what I wanted to do. And especially when I felt that I was not center center of you know, my wife's life besides her relationship with Christ, which was always solid, by the way. So I took resentment to that, but nevertheless, I ended up using ministry as a reason to distance myself from the family. My son had a early on anger issues, and when it came to disciplining, we agreed to disagree on discipline, and I didn't want to get in the way of that. And I kind of felt that, well, since she's a stay-at-home mom, the engineer, I always say that never refer to your wife, guys, as a stay-at-home mom if she stays at home or homeschools the kids, because there's really a lot of work to that. So I ended up distancing myself, and in the name of ministry, which I look back at the situation and I started seeing those things. I started to drive at night. I love driving at night. It's peaceful. It was a way to get away and all. And I became a prayer warrior in 2010, where I prayed fervently all the time. Prayed in the church prayer program and all that. And I ended up starting to pray, calling them prayer drives. But then at work, somebody knew I drove a lot at night, and they said, "Why don't you drive for Uber?" And I said, "What's that?" I looked into that, and I thought, boy, I could make money doing that. So I started to do that. But it wasn't cost effective, because the time I made money, enough money to be a sizable amount, I had to put it all back into my car for repairs, because it was an older car. So I started to stop driving for Uber that much. And one of my last Uber drives, I drove a couple from Pontiac, Michigan to their house. It was only 2 to 3 miles away. And they really appeared to be lost. And as a Christian, I always want to try to share God's love, be Christ to them. So I thought this would be a chance for me to get to know this couple and probably eventually lead them to the Lord. So I thought, man, that'd be a good deed or whatnot. But the problem is my family was at home. I was out driving around and stuff. And at that point, I realized the big picture. I wasn't really serving my family, wasn't really doing much. I was more involved in church ministry than I was the family person. I tried to stay away from conflicts in the family as far as raising our kids and discipline, and that was a raging fire that started happening, and the distance started to grow. Well, when I took this couple home and to their house, I wanted to get to know them a little better, and it was apparent they were drug addicts. I didn't realize that until that night. The guy started to smoke crack with his girlfriend, and of course that was something that really shocked me, but I thought, well, I don't want that to come in between us. But after a while of them smoking crack, I wanted to know what it would be like to be them for 15 to 25 seconds, because I didn't relate with them that much on that scale. So I tried the drug, and instantly the addiction hit, and so I became a weekend drug addict. We got together on the 2 nights I didn't have to work in the morning, because my wife would be sleeping and went to sleep, and I had nothing else to do. So I was always a night person, so I would hang out with them. And after the month, like I said, trying crack with them, I would smoke crack with them. Thought I was in total control still, because I didn't take the drug during the week. But unfortunately, as time grew on, for the second year, I ended up smoking crack every day. It became an everyday drug addiction. And at this point, ironically, I helped this couple get into sobriety, and I ended up meeting some mutual friends of theirs that was another couple. But this time, this couple had 2 young children involved, and I felt more of a importance to try to help them out. But what was weird is I was my addiction of crack had escalated at this time, so it was more of an excuse to keep smoking, plus the fact getting to know a lot of drug dealers and all that, so I wouldn't have to go through these people to get drugs, because I'm sure they would be taking advantage of me as far as money and drugs and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to get drugs directly, so I started to get those from the dealers. But as I realized that I was not a very good functional drug addict, I decided to get sober, clean and sober, and without telling my wife. My wife knew I was hanging out with people, but all she understood me is trying to help them in their addiction. So I ended up trying to hide my crack addiction, but when you're in drugs, you can't hide that. That doesn't hide very well, and my life started becoming unmanageable, and the distance between my wife and I was out of control. I would come home, and I made a man cave downstairs, and unfortunately in the beginning I made it be like in the name of God, because I'd go down there and I'd pray as a prayer warrior. I watched Christian programs. But before too long, when I started taking the drugs and doing the drugs daily, I would smoke down there. And just about the time I realized I needed to get out of this addiction, I stopped taking drugs and went through a bad relapse. Everybody goes through a relapse when they quit drugs. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting sick, stayed home from work for a week, but blame that on the flu and all that kind of stuff. But I came to, started feeling normal. And one night, on a Sunday night, my wife found some misplaced drugs that were in the house, and she confronted me, and I never forget the brokenness of her heart. She said, out of our 23 years of marriage, I never had one minute or moment to ever doubt you, but you've been lying to me for these 2 years. I don't ever know how I'll ever be able to trust you again. She left the house with our daughter. Our daughter was 16 at the time. And I stayed at the house. In about a month, she wanted to come back into the house and have me move out and try to do what I needed to do to get well or do that. And the sad part is I was sober at that point, and nobody believed me. And I really resented that. That ended up creating a relapse for me, getting back into drugs, because once again, the biggest reason I took the drugs is because not just to find out what it would be like to be a drug addict. That was the initial reason, but the drug itself really took control and calmed me and all that. And I grew up dealing with a lot of the pain of, to me, the dysfunctional marriage. So I ended up covering that pain with a drug, and that's why I kept building on top of that. And before too long, even when I relapsed, it wasn't for a long period of time, because eventually my wife filed for divorce since I didn't want to move out of the house, and I ended up being forced out of the house. That was the biggest reason why, and the big why as to stay sober and not go back to the drugs. But now, sober for over a year now, I really understand that life was not a life for me. It would not have been a great future for me. I probably would have been homeless, would have killed myself eventually. And what keeps me clean and sober to this day is obviously Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, getting back into a relationship with him, because when I was in the drugs, my relationship with God was nothing. I turned my back on God, because as a Christian, you got the Holy Spirit that lives inside of you,
right,
that convicts you of your sin. And the conviction was, I don't know what was worse, withdrawals from drugs or the conviction of the Holy Spirit.
Well, the Holy Spirit convicted you enough to get out of that, so you actually were a born-again Christian. You just had to listen for that still small voice.
Yes. Oh, I think you're right. The scriptures say the still small voice, but man, I'll tell you what, it was
crazy.
Distant,
wasn't it?
crazy voice. Yes. Yes, it was.
It was distance because when you turn your back on God, now God doesn't leave you, you leave God. And when
Right.
the Lord's right there with you with open arms, ready to have you come back, it's your decision. He's always there. He's not going to leave. It's your decision. And of course, we all know that once you're a Christian, you'll never lose your salvation, but you can lose fellowship with Him. And
Yes.
that's definitely what you did, is you lost fellowship, and you had to go through, and Satan thought he won you over as far as all this, but then he put self-doubt in you, but then you turned around, and by the power of God that you just turned around, and you said, no way, Satan, you're not getting a hold of me, and you was able to get that relationships back with the Lord.
Right. Correct.
Now, did you have that hearing aids place before all this happened, or was that after?
Yeah, I got into hearing aids, working with hearing aids through a friend in the church that I worked with in children's ministry for 6 years, knew him, special friend and all that. And I worked originally as a desk technician in 2000 to 2007. The job went down to McAllen, Texas. I didn't want to go down there, so
that's
I
what
was
happened.
unemployed. And yes, and then that's when this guy I worked with said, you ought to look into the hearing aid field. And he goes, I can teach you, train you, can get certified, your Michigan's license, and started working with him from 2008 to 2012. I ended up leaving for a couple of years to pursue a career as a sales engineer. And after 2 years, I went back to the hearing aid field, but I ended up working for a different company for 4 years, and then ended up losing that job, not because of the drugs. A lot of people thought it was because of the drugs. It was a corporate thing. And so the boss, my old boss, original boss, Cruz Hearing, took me back and started working with them. But this time it was a lot different because I was huge in the drug addiction and trying to get sober and stay clean, because knowing that I would not be a good functioning employee on the drugs. And that's when the divorce thing started coming by and all that, and needed to change, and ended up changing through the divorce. But it still was a struggle. But to this day, I am involved in multiple 12-step programs around in the area. My biggest mission at this point is to continue to stay sober and clean, working the 12 steps, but also to help others in the program realize that it's not necessarily your higher power or as God as you understand Him, but it's the God of the Bible that the 12 steps were built on. And why serve something of your understanding if it's not the true God of the Bible? Because, yeah, a person uses that to understand that they're powerless over that, but if they're giving the glory to an entity that really doesn't exist, they're just wasting their time. And in the end, it doesn't get them to that point of eternal destiny in heaven. So I want to be a shining light without getting involved in the drugs and getting involved in something that I shouldn't get involved in, but also making a difference within that area of addiction recovery.
Right. So with you telling your story, I noticed on Facebook you're saying that you're going to these different places, not only as a past addict, but you're actually giving your testimony as to saying, hey, there's more to Christianity, there's more on the other side. You need to really listen to what I have to tell you. And then it's not that they get automatically convicted, but how's the turnout going on that?
It's going really good. God really leads me into a lot of different situations. As a Christian, we should always have that mentality, here I am, send me, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows your talents. He knows your, just like yourself, Steve. You know, you're a great host. You're a great personality,
Thank you.
and so he's using you in many different ways to share the gospel. And in my addiction recovery, he's using that story to help other people understand that there is a way out of addiction, and drugs is not it, alcohol is not it. And I give him the glory for everything, and continue to want to be used by Christ, because that's the ultimate. To me, that is the ultimate high of life, and that is to be a productive Christian and servant of Christ.
Right. So what's it look like for you in the future?
Well, right now it's we have a saying called "Just for Today," and staying sober, helping out a lot of people. Try not to get that bogged down with, you know, my main priorities as far as Christ being the number one. But being officially divorced, I still want to pursue a relationship with my wife, knowing that I broke her heart and all that, but also there is forgiveness during that. But I don't know the extent of her brokenness. God deals with that in her heart, and she knows eventually she's got to forgive me, but not necessarily take me back.
Right.
But I hope there'd be a miracle behind this, and be able to prove to her that I am the man that she married originally.
Right.
Unfortunately, drugs just
drugs
created
destroy families. They don't help in any way.
Yes.
Right. So what about the relationship with the kids?
That's a difficult situation. That's a fine line. My son has been always a difficult situation, even when I was married, just because of his anger issues. He's walked totally away from God, unfortunately, and my wife has done an unconditional love. This is where it's been tough for me personally in this divorce situation, because he would get so violent to the point of anger, of basically cursing out the family, cursing out our beliefs, our morals, our ethics. Didn't want to do anything with the family. And when he turned 18, he was out. He left the house in search of the greener pastures, and it didn't last too long. But still, he didn't want to change as far as the rules and regulations of the house. Unfortunately, I always say my wife is the best wife I've ever seen or been around. She loves her kids. She loves the Lord, but she's very much of an enabler. It's a fine line. Her biggest thing of not really wanting to have a heavy discipline is grace. She says, this is what grace is all about. But when I asked her during the divorce, what about my grace? Where's my grace comes from? Point taken with her is, you know, he was a teenager, still growing up and learning things. I was a grown adult. I should have known better, especially as a Christian. And so that's the thing behind that. But my relationship with my daughter, she's going to be turning 18 next June.
Wow.
And, yeah, and she's got a lot of things. Yeah, she's got a lot of things going for her. She loves the Lord. She serves in the church. She's a sign language
that's awesome.
signer at church. She's a drum major, one of the youngest drum majors in the high school. She actually became a part of the marching band when she was in middle school. She's very talented and all that. But my relationship with her is non-existent at the moment, because I think she's still healing from the wounds.
Right.
Seeing her mom broken, and she's broken herself. Seeing this person she called dad, and especially involved in the church, that totally took the worst turn and choice he could ever make, and become a drug addict. But I always have the hope that down the road she'll understand. Hopefully accept my sobriety and trying to change my ways, and I'll be able to adapt a personal relationship back with her. I don't want to force her into visitations or anything through the courts, just for the best interest of her.
Right.
But that's a thorn in my side, so to speak.
Right.
And,
Well,
I always say when I made the wrong moves and stuff, and during the divorce, I felt that I was betrayed a lot by my wife. She did what she had to do. I understand that.
right.
But when the things were going on, I felt that it was like Satan stabbing me in the back with a knife.
Right.
But when it comes to the relationship with my daughter and her not wanting to visit me or talk with me or anything like that, it feels like the devil is not stabbing me anymore, but turning the knife inside of me.
Right.
But that's where God's healing, his forgiveness, grace, mercy, and love for us heals these things, heals our brokenness, and helps us move forward. And only by the grace of God we find sobriety and a better life.
That's right. Amen. Because when you're dealing with a divorce, you're dealing with family, you're dealing with kids. Now, if they were younger, obviously it would. I'm sure it really hurt. But as they grow old, I got a friend of mine who's dealing with the same thing, where they're divorced. The kids are older, and the relationship with them is basically okay, but it could be better. But the daughter seems to be more doing things in the church, just like your daughter is. So it's good that it's not affecting your daughter's life. She's moving on and she's doing well, and I guess that's what makes you proud and happy.
Yeah, definitely. But still, that's that part that obviously a father wants to have that relationship
Yep.
with his kids.
That will
There's a
always
song
be there.
Yes. There's a song out there by a guy named Rob Bennett, or Bob Bennett, I think.
Yeah.
It's called "No Such Thing as Divorce," and I love it how he says it. He says, "My dear children, how I love you with my life, but though your mother has decided not to be my wife, there's only one thing that will never change. There is no such thing as divorce between a father and his son, between a daddy and his daughter." And then he goes into making amends for some of the choices he's made in life that has caused this reason. Because there's always a cause to a divorce. So that, unfortunately, that's something that I remember my wife saying. We were talking about a reconciliation, or even having her drop the charges of divorce, and I agreed to just separate from her for a while, and until she felt comfortable and safe with me moving back in. And I told her, I said, the pastor, when I shared my story with him, he really showed me a lot of grace through the story and the addiction by saying, I can understand why you did what you did, but he said, you're probably one of the most passionate people I know. He said, you're like David, a man after God's own heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought that up to my wife, and I said, I've returned to my first love, Christ,
Right.
and all that, and all that. And she said, well, just like David was a man after God's own heart, he had an affair with Bathsheba. She said, as much as I know, hopefully he didn't have an affair with any human being. But she said, just like David had an affair with Bathsheba, you had an affair with the world. David had his consequences. She said, you're going to be going through your consequences. And at that point, that time, that stung. That felt like another jab in the back from the devil. But, I can't fault her, because she was hurting. She hurt so bad because of the betrayal of those 2 years of our 23 years of marriage, and can't hold that against her. Forgive her, and hope and pray that one day she'll forgive me, and God will perform a miracle of reconciliation.
That's what I was just going to say. sometimes it works out for a reconciliation and sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes if it doesn't, that's a blessing in disguise depending on the situation.
Yeah. Yep. Because I know God never agrees with divorce, but we make our bed. We have to face our consequences. And some people hear my story when I share that, and they go, "Man, do you even want to get remarried because you're so accepting of that?" But the best thing is to accept things, move forward, because if we carry grudges in the situation, that kind of interrupts our sobriety, our life and relationship with God, and our productivity as a Christian.
Exactly. And see, I actually, you just exactly said something. I was just going to ask you if there was anything that you'd like to say to anybody, and you just said it, so I don't have to ask you. You just went ahead and said it to folks out there that are struggling in that. And is there any last words, before we hang up?
Well, for those that are dealing with addictions and want the better way out, that is plug into a system, 12-step system. It would be really good if you could plug into a Christian 12-step program. But a lot of times that's not necessarily available out there. But just realize when you get into a 12-step system and they talk about God, that was how the 12-step originally started. Don't go with the alternative, God or higher power of your understanding, because you're just going to be wasting your time. Realize that that's God of the Bible, and continue in a Bible-believing church, learning more about Christ and your own personal relationship as a Christian. And if you're not a Christian, understand that God is there for you, and it's a great opportunity to change your life with a relationship with the God of the universe that created you, loves you, died for you, and there is such a thing as life after drugs and alcohol or any addiction.
Amen. Well, John, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and share your testimony and share your life with us. And, you and I will be getting together again soon, and I hope to make it to Michigan to come see you.
Yeah, definitely. And if I'm out in the area of Branson, Missouri, I'd love to stop by and say hi and visit with you, and look forward to meeting with you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Well, that was John Boynton, good friend of mine. He and I been through some stuff together, but he definitely has been through a lot more than I have. So I just want to thank John again, and we'll have him on again in the future. I just want to let you know now, coming up next is Sacred Ways with Troy and Belinda Johansson, and they've got a great guest. It's Nimmer Roden. So you'll want to stay tuned. I know it's going to be a good show because her and Daryl, they're great people, and they love the Lord, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I don't know if I'll be able to stay here live to see it, but I'll see it, Troy. So stay tuned for that, and I just want to thank everyone again. So just remember to take care, have a brighter day. Remember, God's large and in charge. Take care. Bye-bye.